The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and crimson, its light shimmering on the calm waves of the ocean. Ava Williams and Maya Johnson strolled along the secluded stretch of beach, their movements unhurried and deliberate. This wasn't the first time they had walked this particular shoreline, but tonight felt different. The usual tranquility seemed almost too perfect, the kind that sets one's instincts on edge, though neither woman said it aloud. Ava adjusted the strap of her crossbody bag, glancing at Maya out of the corner of her eye. Maya's focus was forward, her silhouette backlit by the sinking sun, every line of her posture exuding calm. It was the kind of calm that only came from years of experience, one that masked readiness for anything. For the past 3 years, this beach had been their sanctuary, a place where they could momentarily shed the weight of their past lives. Both had served as counterterrorism officers for a decade, their work taking them across continents and placing them in situations most civilians couldn't imagine. They had seen the worst humanity had to offer, acts of violence, manipulation, and cruelty on both large and small scales. And now, even as civilians, they carried those memories, tempered by their hard-won resilience. The air was thick with salt, and the only sounds were the steady crash of waves and the occasional call of a seagull overhead. But then, another sound broke through. A distant, dissonant rumble. Voices. Male voices. Ava slowed her pace slightly, her sharp eyes scanning the dunes ahead. She didn't stop entirely, but her hand brushed the strap of her bag again, her fingertips grazing the zipper. Maya, quick to notice Ava's change in energy, glanced in the same direction. They both saw them at the same time. 6 figures, silhouetted against the darkening sky, moving down the dune. The men were loud, their voices carrying over the ocean breeze. There was a swagger in their steps, an unchecked confidence that immediately set both women on edge. Ava and Maya exchanged a brief glance, years of partnership condensed into a single look. Maya's jaw tightened slightly, though her expression remained composed. "They're just passing through," Maya murmured, her voice low and even. "Maybe," Ava replied softly, her eyes never leaving the approaching group. "But let's be ready." As the men drew closer, their laughter grew louder, tinged with an edge that set Ava's instincts on high alert. They weren't drunk, but they moved with the kind of boldness that came from a different sort of intoxication, entitlement. The leader, a tall man with close-cropped hair and a smirk that seemed permanently etched on his face, was the first to speak. "Well, what do we have here?" he called out, his voice cutting through the quiet. "2 ladies enjoying the sunset?" The group slowed their pace as they neared Ava and Maya, the dynamic shifting with each step. They weren't just walking anymore. They were closing in, their formation loose but intentional. Maya stopped walking, planting her feet firmly in the sand. Ava followed suit, her posture relaxed but purposeful. The men spread out slightly, forming a semicircle around them. "Beautiful night," another man chimed in, his grin crooked and suggestive. "But it could be a little better, don't you think?" Ava's sharp eyes darted between the men, assessing them the way she'd been trained to assess a hostile target. 6 men, all mid to late 20s, varying heights but all broad-shouldered, moving with an ease that suggested they didn't expect much resistance. Their leader had positioned himself slightly forward, clearly the one setting the tone. Another man, standing to the far left, seemed less sure of himself, his eyes darting nervously between the women and his companions. "We're just passing through," Maya said, her voice steady and firm. "No trouble here." The leader chuckled, his smirk widening as he took a small step closer. "Oh, we don't want any trouble either. Just thought we'd say hi. Be friendly." The others laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. One of them muttered something under his breath, a crude comment followed by another round of laughter. Ava didn't flinch. Her focus remained on their movements, not their words. "What's in the bag?" one of the men asked, nodding toward Ava. "Nothing you'd be interested in," Ava replied calmly. The leader's smirk twisted into something darker. "Oh, I wouldn't be so sure about that." He motioned toward one of his companions, who moved to Ava's left, cutting off her path to retreat. Another man mirrored the motion on Maya's side. It was a tactic they'd seen before. Amateurs trying to intimidate, mistaking numbers for strength. The women remained rooted, their expressions unreadable. "You're not from around here, are you?" another man asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "Does it matter?" Maya shot back. The men exchanged glances, their amusement growing. "Feisty," one of them muttered. "Let's not make this difficult," the leader said, his voice lowering as he took another step forward. "We'll take what you've got, and you can go on your way. No need to get all worked up." The tension in the air thickened. Ava's eyes flicked toward Maya, her gaze a silent question. Maya gave the smallest of nods. "I'm afraid we can't help you with that," Ava said evenly, her tone as steady as her heartbeat. The leader's smirk faltered for the briefest moment, confusion flickering across his face. He wasn't used to defiance, especially from women he assumed would be easy to intimidate. "You've got some nerve," one of the men spat, his voice tinged with anger. "We're trying to be nice here." "Nice?" Maya repeated, arching an eyebrow. Her voice was calm, but the sharpness in her tone wasn't lost on the group. The leader's smirk returned, though it was less certain now. "Last chance, ladies. Hand it over or things get messy." Neither Ava nor Maya moved. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the grass on the dunes and carrying the faint sound of waves. "Messy?" Ava said, her lips curving into a faint smile. "You have no idea what messy looks like." The leader's face darkened, his patience wearing thin. He gestured sharply to his companions. "Enough talk." As the first man lunged toward Ava, the stillness of the scene shattered like glass. The leader lunged first, his hand reaching for Ava's bag in an attempt to grab or yank it away. He moved with the reckless confidence of someone who had never been told no before, but his reach fell short. Ava pivoted smoothly, sidestepping him while her right hand shot up to intercept his wrist. Her movements were fluid, almost effortless, as she twisted his arm upward, redirecting his momentum. The leader stumbled forward, his balance compromised, and Ava finished the motion with a sharp shove to his back, sending him sprawling into the sand. "Big mistake," Ava said evenly, her voice calm but carrying a dangerous undertone. The other men froze for a split second, the sight of their leader face down in the sand causing their bravado to falter. That hesitation was all Maya needed. To her right, one of the men made the mistake of charging directly at her. His fists clenched as if brute force alone would be enough. Maya didn't wait for him to close the gap. She stepped forward, meeting him halfway, her left hand striking upward in a sharp motion to his throat. The man gasped, staggering backward, clutching at his neck as his breath came in ragged, panicked gulps. Another man moved to flank Maya, his arms raised to grab her from behind. She heard his footsteps before he reached her and dropped into a crouch, sweeping her leg out in a smooth arc. His legs buckled as her foot connected with his ankle, sending him toppling to the sand with a heavy thud. On the other side of the circle, two men attempted to double-team Ava. One swung wildly, his punches more about aggression than technique, while the other tried to circle behind her. Ava ducked the first punch, her movements precise and economical, before stepping sideways to avoid the second man entirely. "Amateurs," Ava muttered under her breath. As the first man swung again, she deflected his arm with her forearm, twisting his wrist outward in a quick, practiced motion. He cried out as she disarmed him of the small pocket knife he had tried to brandish. With a flick of her wrist, the knife clattered to the ground, and Ava planted her elbow into his sternum, sending him staggering backward. The second man, emboldened by the knife's absence, rushed at her. Ava pivoted on her heel, using his momentum against him. She grabbed his shirt collar, pulling him forward as she delivered a knee to his stomach. He doubled over, groaning before collapsing onto the sand. The leader, back on his feet now and angrier than ever, charged at Ava again, his face red with humiliation. "You think you're tough?" he snarled, his fists swinging wildly. Ava's expression remained cool, almost bored, as she sidestepped his attack. She countered with a sharp jab to his temple, followed by a swift kick to the back of his knee. He dropped instantly, his knees hitting the sand with a muffled thud. By now, 3 of the men were on the ground, groaning and clutching various parts of their bodies. The others hesitated, their earlier bravado replaced by confusion and fear. They exchanged uncertain glances, the realization dawning on them that they had severely underestimated their targets. Maya dusted off her hands, her gaze sweeping over the remaining men. "Still want to keep going?" she asked, her tone almost conversational. One of them, probably the youngest, took a step backward, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "We're done," he stammered. The leader, still on his knees, glared up at Ava with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "What the hell are you two?" he spat, his voice hoarse. Ava leaned down slightly, her expression unflinching. "Smarter than you," she said simply. The remaining men hurried to help their fallen companions, their earlier aggression replaced by a desperate need to leave. Within moments, the group was retreating, their footsteps uneven as they scrambled up the dunes. Ava and Maya watched them go, neither woman moving until the sounds of the men's retreat faded into the distance. Maya exhaled slowly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "They're going to feel that tomorrow," she said dryly. Ava nodded, scanning the area one last time. "Good. Maybe they'll think twice next time." The sound of sirens in the distance broke the silence. The local authorities were on their way, likely alerted by a passerby or someone who had overheard the commotion. Ava and Maya remained where they were, waiting calmly as the flashing red and blue lights grew closer. When the first officer approached, a tall man with a notepad in hand, he glanced between the 2 women and the empty stretch of beach. "We got reports of an altercation," he said, his tone professional but curious. "Everything okay here?" "Depends on your definition of okay," Maya said evenly. Ava stepped forward, her tone measured and polite. "6 men tried to harass and rob us. They've since left. No serious injuries, but they got physical." The officer nodded, jotting down notes. "Can you describe them?" Ava and Maya provided a concise but thorough account of the incident, their descriptions of the men precise and detailed. As they spoke, a few other officers arrived, surveying the area and asking follow-up questions. "There's been a pattern of this kind of behavior in the area," Ava added as they wrapped up their statements. Her tone was calm, but there was a deliberate edge to her words. "Groups targeting people they assume won't fight back. Often people of color." The officer's pen paused for a fraction of a second before continuing its movement across the page. "Noted," he said, his voice careful. When the questioning was done, Ava and Maya exchanged a brief glance, silently agreeing that they'd said enough for now. As the officers returned to their vehicles, Ava and Maya lingered on the beach for a moment longer. The stars had begun to emerge, their soft glow reflecting on the water. Despite the adrenaline still coursing through their veins, both women felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. "Think they'll do anything about it?" Maya asked, nodding toward the departing officers. Ava shrugged. "Maybe, maybe not. Either way, we made our point tonight." Maya smirked. "More like they made our point for us." Ava chuckled, the sound light against the night air. Together, they turned and began walking back along the beach, the tension of the encounter easing with every step. It began with a news clipping. 2 days after the confrontation on the beach, Ava and Maya sat in a modest coffee shop tucked into a quiet corner of the city. Sunlight streamed through the windows, glinting off the polished wooden tables. Between them lay a collection of documents. Police reports, news articles, and handwritten notes scribbled on scraps of paper. "I'm telling you, it's a pattern," Ava said, her voice low but insistent. She tapped the headline of the article in front of her. "String of attacks reported in local parks and beaches." Maya leaned closer, scanning the article. "Same MO," she murmured. "Groups of men harassing people of color in areas where they assume they won't fight back. And it's escalating." Ava nodded, her jaw tightening. "This isn't random. Someone's encouraging it, maybe even organizing it." It was Maya who suggested contacting Claire Monroe, an investigative journalist known for her relentless pursuit of the truth. Claire had made her name uncovering corruption in the city's housing authority and exposing police misconduct in neighboring counties. If anyone could dig deeper into this, it was her. The first meeting with Claire was brief but promising. Sitting in her cluttered office surrounded by piles of notebooks and a corkboard covered in photos and news clippings, Claire listened intently as Ava and Maya recounted their experience and shared their suspicions. "This isn't just about a few bad actors," Ava said, her voice steady. "We think there's an entire network behind these incidents. And we need your help to find it." Claire leaned back in her chair, studying them for a moment. "You're not just civilians, are you?" Maya exchanged a glance with Ava before answering. "We've worked in intelligence. Counterterrorism." Claire's eyebrows rose, but she didn't press for details. Instead, she reached for her notepad. "All right," she said. "Let's see where this rabbit hole leads." Over the next few weeks, the trio worked tirelessly. Claire dove into public records and investigative databases, following leads that Ava and Maya flagged as significant. What began as a trickle of information soon turned into a flood of connections, each thread weaving a tapestry of hate. One of Claire's first discoveries was a social media account operated by a small but vocal extremist group. The posts were littered with coded language and dog whistles, but a closer look revealed ties to several known hate groups operating in the region. The group's followers often referenced gatherings and events, most of which were held on properties linked to a single name: Victor Trent. Victor Trent, Claire announced during a late-night meeting at her office. She slid a glossy photo of the man across the table. He was middle-aged, with a perfectly tailored suit, a politician's smile, and the kind of confidence that came with both privilege and power. CEO of Trent Holdings, Claire continued. Real estate, energy, tech, you name it, he's got his hands in it. Publicly, he's a philanthropist. Sponsors community events, donates to schools, that sort of thing. And privately? Maya asked, her tone sharp. Claire tapped a stack of documents on her desk. Privately, he's funding hate groups. Quietly, of course. The money flows through a series of shell companies and nonprofit organizations. But the end recipients are clear. These groups targeting Black communities and other marginalized groups. Ava picked up the photo, her eyes narrowing. He's not just funding them, she said. He's empowering them, giving them the resources to act. Maya nodded. This is systemic, organized. Claire folded her arms. And illegal, if we can prove it. The next phase of their investigation required more than just research, it required strategy. Ava and Maya leaned on their intelligence backgrounds, mapping out Trent's network and identifying key players. They tracked his finances, using Claire's media contacts to access records that would have otherwise been sealed. One name kept surfacing in their investigation. Mark Evers, Trent's longtime associate and a man with a reputation for doing the CEO's dirty work. Mark managed several of Trent's shell companies, acting as the middleman for financial transactions that were just suspicious enough to draw attention. We need to get to him, Maya said one evening as the three of them pored over their findings. If we can turn him, we'll have everything we need to take Trent down. It wasn't easy. Mark was cautious, rarely staying in one place for long. But persistence paid off. One of Claire's contacts, a whistleblower who had once worked for Trent Holdings, tipped them off about a property Mark frequented, a secluded mansion on the outskirts of the city. Ava and Maya staked out the location for days, observing the comings and goings. Finally, they saw their opportunity. Mark arrived late one evening, alone, his usual security detail conspicuously absent. The confrontation was swift. Ava and Maya intercepted him in the driveway, their approach silent and calculated. Before Mark could react, Maya stepped forward, holding up a folder of documents. "We know what you've been doing," she said, her voice cold. "We know how the money moves. We know who it goes to. And unless you want to take the fall for Trent, you're going to help us." Mark's face went pale. He stammered, trying to deny their accusations, but the evidence was damning. Photos, bank statements, emails, it was all there. "You don't have to go down with him," Ava said, her tone softer but no less firm. "Cooperate and you'll have a chance to walk away from this. But if you stay silent, you're complicit. And we'll make sure everyone knows it." After a tense silence, Mark caved. "What do you want to know?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. With Mark's cooperation, the pieces fell into place quickly. He provided details about Trent's financial operations, including key transactions and communications that linked him directly to the hate groups. He also revealed a series of meetings Trent had held with group leaders, solidifying his role as the network's puppet master. Claire worked tirelessly to corroborate Mark's claims, reaching out to her network of sources to verify the information. Meanwhile, Ava and Maya coordinated with local law enforcement, carefully building a case that would hold up under scrutiny. "This isn't just about taking Trent down," Ava said during one of their strategy sessions. "It's about dismantling the entire system he's built." By the time they were ready to act, the evidence was overwhelming. Bank statements, recorded conversations, emails, and witness testimonies painted a clear picture of Trent's involvement. As they finalized their plans, Claire looked at Ava and Maya with a mix of admiration and determination. "We're not just exposing him," she said. "We're making a statement. People like Trent thrive on fear and silence. This time, they won't get either." The takedown began with methodical precision. Ava and Maya leaned into their years of counterterrorism training, crafting a strategy that mirrored the operations they'd once led in foreign conflict zones. This wasn't just about stopping Victor Trent. It was about dismantling his entire network piece by piece, ensuring it couldn't rebuild in the shadows. Mark Evers had been the linchpin, and his cooperation provided them with a roadmap of the organization's inner workings. Names, locations, secret meeting places. Everything Trent had tried to keep hidden was suddenly exposed. For weeks, Ava and Maya coordinated a series of operations, working closely with law enforcement and Claire's investigative team. The effort was deliberate, quiet, and relentless. Members of Trent's network, group leaders, financiers, and enforcers were identified and apprehended. One of the first raids took place in a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of town. From the outside, it looked like an abandoned storage facility, but Mark had revealed it as a central hub for the distribution of materials, propaganda, weaponry, and funding instructions. The operation unfolded under the cover of night. Ava and Maya observed from a distance as a tactical team moved in. Ava's sharp eyes scanned the perimeter, her earpiece crackling with updates from the officers inside. "South wing is clear," one officer reported. Maya leaned closer to Ava, her voice low. "Mark's intel was good. They're finding exactly what he said would be here. Let's hope that's true for the rest of the sites," Ava replied, her tone measured but edged with determination. The raid uncovered a treasure trove of evidence. Financial records tying Trent to the warehouse, blueprints for planned attacks, and correspondence that revealed the network's reach extended far beyond the city. As more members of the network were apprehended, Mark's role as a cooperating witness became even more crucial. Under the protection of law enforcement, he began to provide testimony that painted a damning picture of Trent's operations. "Trent doesn't just fund these groups," Mark said during one debriefing. His voice was steady but tinged with guilt. "He coordinates them. He decides who gets what resources, who gets priority. He's the reason they're as organized as they are." Ava leaned forward, her gaze sharp. "And the attacks? Were those his idea?" Mark hesitated, then nodded. "Not all of them, but the big ones? The ones that made the news? Those were his orders. He wanted them to make a statement." Maya folded her arms, her jaw tightening. "A statement built on hate and fear." Mark's eyes dropped to the table, unable to meet their gaze. "I didn't realize how deep it went until it was too late." The case against Victor Trent was monumental. As the evidence piled up, the media caught wind of the investigation. Headlines splashed across newspapers and websites. "Prominent businessman tied to extremist network, hate crimes investigation leads to wealthy CEO," and "Victor Trent, philanthropist or puppet master?" The trial became one of the most high-profile cases in the country. The courtroom was packed with reporters, activists, and members of the community. Ava and Maya attended every session, their presence a quiet but powerful reminder of the work that had led to this moment. Trent's defense team was ruthless. They tried to paint him as a philanthropist with no knowledge of the crimes committed by the groups he had funded. They questioned Mark's credibility, pointing to his own involvement in the organization as a reason to doubt his testimony. But the prosecution, armed with overwhelming evidence and the support of Ava and Maya, dismantled the defense's arguments piece by piece. One of the most compelling moments came when Mark took the stand. "Why did you decide to cooperate?" the prosecutor asked. Mark hesitated, glancing toward Ava and Maya in the gallery. "Because I realized the damage we were doing, the hate we were spreading. People were getting hurt, K*led, because of what we were enabling. I couldn't stay silent anymore." The defense attorney stood, ready to pounce. "Mr. Evers, isn't it true that you only agreed to cooperate to avoid a harsher sentence?" Mark's jaw tightened, but he remained composed. "I'm not denying my role in this. I deserve to be held accountable. But that doesn't change the fact that Victor Trent was the one pulling the strings. Without him, none of this would have happened." The courtroom buzzed with murmurs, the weight of Mark's words cutting through the defense's strategy. As the trial neared its conclusion, Ava and Maya were called to testify about their investigation. Their accounts of the violence they had witnessed and the evidence they had uncovered painted a vivid picture of Trent's culpability. Mr. Trent's network wasn't just an organization, Ava said during her testimony. It was a system designed to instill fear and perpetuate hate. And he was at the center of it. Maya added, "This wasn't about ignorance or negligence. It was deliberate. And it's time for that accountability to begin." The jury deliberated for 3 days. Each hour felt like an eternity. Finally, the verdict was read. Guilty. Victor Trent was convicted on multiple charges, including conspiracy to commit hate crimes, funding T*RR** wrist activities, and incitement of violence. The sentence was severe, decades in prison, effectively a life sentence for the man who had once seen himself as untouchable. As the courtroom emptied after the sentencing, Ava and Maya lingered for a moment, watching as Trent was led away in handcuffs. Claire joined them, a satisfied but weary expression on her face. "This is big," Claire said. "Bigger than I think we even realize yet." "It's a step," Ava replied. "But there's still so much more to do." Maya nodded. "At least now, people will see that no one is above accountability. Not even men like Trent." The 3 women stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their accomplishment sinking in. The aftermath of the trial rippled through the community and beyond. The hate groups Trent had funded were dismantled, their leaders either arrested or forced into hiding. Public conversations about systemic hate and the influence of wealth in perpetuating it began to gain traction. For Ava and Maya, the victory was bittersweet. They knew the fight wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like progress was being made. That evening, they returned to the same beach where it had all started. The waves crashed gently against the shore, the air cool and crisp. Maya glanced at Ava, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Do you think it's really over?" Ava shook her head. "Not over, but different. Better, maybe." Maya chuckled softly. "Better is a good place to start." Together, they stood in the fading light, the horizon stretching endlessly before them. They didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but they knew one thing for certain. They were ready.